Let me just start off with giving you details about what took place in New Orleans yesterday, or I mean last night, sorry, or I guess this morning technically. At least 10 are killed in New Orleans after a driver intentionally rammed into a crowd on Bourbon Street. That is what happened. I believe 35 are injured as of now when a driver rammed a pickup truck into a crowd during a New Year's celebration on Bourbon Street in New Orleans early on Wednesday morning. The FBI is investigating it as an act of terrorism. The FBI has identified the suspect as a 42-year-old Texas man and Army veteran. Law enforcement sources say the suspect, who was killed in a firefight with officers, had an ISIS flag at the time of the attack. The FBI said it is investigating the potential associations with terrorist organizations. The FBI said it doesn't think the driver was solely responsible. Weapons as well as potentially improvised explosive devices, otherwise known as IEDs, were found on the vehicle. Officials have located IEDs in the area. The attack in the popular French Quarter happened less than a mile from where the Sugar Bowl was to be hosted Wednesday. The annual college football game was postponed for 24 hours for public safety reasons, the Bulls CEO said. There was a police barricade. So if you're wondering like how this happened, there was of course a police barricade, which apparently the driver went around. Video shows the moment the FBI says Shamsuddin Jabbar raced onto a packed Bourbon Street from Canal Street in a pickup truck with Texas plates and an ISIS flag. There's video being reviewed by FBI of 3 men and 1 woman placing bombs around the area. A couple things that are immediately interesting, obviously, is that yesterday we talked about the surveillance state. Yesterday we talked about how the police are supposed to navigate around these sorts of things and apprehend suspects and have this like massive net of surveillance, and how that is going to subvert and apprehend and stop additional, terror attacks from potentially taking place. Now, what's interesting is, as I said yesterday, they don't do that. It doesn't actually end up doing that, playing that role at all. And this is yet further evidence that it doesn't do that at all. But having said that, we have, I don't want to show the video here if it shows like the actual, he just kind of hooks a right directly in to the crowd, passing a cop car. I won't show the rest of it, but I just wanted to show you that like they have what do you call it? They have placed barricades. There's a YouTube video that is now deleted of the suspect as well. It's just like, it's crazy to me that God, everything is logged online. It's wild. If only there were a billionaire CEO there, the cops would have done a better job. No, they wouldn't have. That's the whole, they would not have. I don't think the cops couldn't stop Brian Thompson from being shot in broad daylight either. Calling it terrorism reads racist. I mean, no, it is definitionally an act of terrorism. The problem is, I guess, that is intentionally vague and almost never applied to white supremacist domestic terrorists, even though they run up the numbers. It's an act of terror. Like 100%. This is colloquially, when you talk about trying to kill as many civilians as possible, that is an act of domestic terror. Whether it's by car ramming, whether it's by shooting, whether it's by blowing stuff up with IEDs, improvised explosive devices, that is definitionally and colloquially what you would consider to be an act of terrorism. The fact that he did this with an ISIS flag or potentially converted to Islam and then got radicalized and was potentially working with other people, that doesn't make it more terrorism, and then like someone like Dylan Roof less terrorism. Those would both be colloquially, and even with the vague interpretation of what the terror designation is, both of those would still be considered acts of terrorism. The problem, of course, is that in many circumstances, when it's a white supremacist domestic shooter or an anti-government far-right extremist of different backgrounds, they are oftentimes not considered terrorists in the same frequency as obviously someone who might be an Islamic revert or someone doing it at the behest of ISIS. That's the difference. They just don't call the other thing that. But even then, the definition is intentionally vague regardless. It is a horrifying tragedy, of course, in an unimaginably violent nation, in a nation where this sort of thing happens all too frequently. If you rob it of the identity markers, death and destruction is incredibly commonplace. Mass shootings are a lot more frequent in this country than any other nation. And yet this on top of, like, this will most likely get a lot more understandable coverage considering the timing and also the potential implications given who did this act of violence. Now, the usual actors that want to turn every tragedy into another talking point for their pet issues seemingly considered this to be an undocumented migrant. New Orleans terror attackers said to have come across the border in Eagle Pass 2 days ago. Shut the border down. Who did our government bomb lately that is taking it out on innocent Americans? Apparently, the New Orleans car ramming attacker was also a U.S. citizen born and raised in Texas. Also, crime rates are not anywhere close to where they've been in the past, but neither Trump nor Sheep will let facts get in the way of their hateful narrative. Here's the Trump statement. When I said that criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, the statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media, but it turned out to be true because they are more like the right wing is broadly more focused on undocumented migrant crime and consistently trying to portray that as the overarching narrative so they can tie it back to their white nativist immigration strategies. They jumped the gun and immediately went, oh, this is an undocumented migrant, not realizing that this is another type of common narrative that you can always point to, which is Islamic terror, right? So they kind of blew their load a little bit too early, it seems. Apparently, Fox News also tried to hit the human smuggling angle here.
We understand that the truck does have a history of plate readers. It never actually passed through from Mexico into Eagle Pass. However, the license plate on this truck has a history of plate readers at the border in patterns, and I'm quoting, that may be suspicious for human smuggling. When this story first broke, a lot of people wanted to know the identity of the suspect. When you hear human smuggling, you think about the border, and the border has obviously been such a dangerous, ignored problem for this country with so many of these sleeper cells and terrorists who want to harm Americans illegally crossing our borders. What part of that most alarms you?
Crazy theory, I know, but isn't it weird that all this lines up with the border stuff to help Trump justify his weird soft invasion plans for Mexico? I mean, it's not. That's not crazy. The crazy thing is they jumped the gun to very clearly treat this as though it was an undocumented migrant, or at least like heavily leaning on the side that like this is an undocumented migrant related attack, because that is what they are trying to, Look, the government has certain enemies, okay, that they like to point to. The right specifically, and sometimes even Democrats, like to point to a common villain. If you have a common villain that everyone needs to be afraid of, you can justify a lot of crazy invasions of privacy. You can justify a lot of military action. You manufacture consent surrounding this common villain with stereotypes in media. And right now, that common villain is not Muslims broadly, even though that was the common villain, the number one enemy of America and the number one enemy of the West for quite a while under the War on Terror, America's War on Terror initiatives. Nowadays, because the common villain for the modern right is undocumented migrants, that's the reason why they immediately hit the undocumented migrant button. For some on the internet, their common villain is trans people. So whenever there's a mass shooting, they say, oh, it's a trans person that did that. For some on the right, the common villain is undocumented migrants. So whenever there's a mass shooting, they go, oh, that was an undocumented migrant that did that. The statistical probability does not matter in this situation. It does not matter. It doesn't factor into the equation at all, even though the most common acts of domestic terror are conducted by oftentimes straight white men. Doesn't matter, by the way. I'm not saying that to be like, this is somehow important to factor in. It's just that even if you don't engage in any sort of speculation, these people oftentimes do not engage in any sort of statistical analysis. When engaging in this speculation, it's purely to use any sort of violence to contribute to the overarching enemy's narrative that they have. The only thing that's important about this, understanding what's going on here, is that nobody really cares about waiting for more facts to come out and immediately jump to whoever the common villain is, the common villain of the day is, or the common villain of the month is, and say, oh, this is it. It must be a migrant. It turns out it's not. Turns out it's a dude born and raised in America, Army veteran, recent convert to Islam, and was divorced from his first wife and seemingly was exhibiting erratic behavior, according to the New York Times. A man who knew Shamsuddin Bahar Jabbar tells us Jabbar had converted to Islam, then began acting erratically in recent months. The concerning behavior led him having limited contact with his children. We also spoke to the man who rented the truck to Jabbar. Here's our updating story on the suspect in New Orleans. Divorced from 2 wives. Sorry, he got divorced, he got remarried, and then I believe divorced again. Federal agents at the home of the second wife of the Bourbon Street attacker in Houston, Texas, where the woman's new husband, Dwayne Marsh, said Jabbar had begun to convert to Islam within the last year and was being all crazy. This is from Steve Herman, House Bureau Chief of Voice of America News. Here's a video of him as well. 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, accused of carrying out the attack, uploaded a video to YouTube where he introduced himself as a property manager. And I gave you his background, his extensive background here as well. Oh, here it is. This is from Intercept investigative reporter, Guardian investigative reporter, written for Politico, Mother Joe's Business Insider, Jacqueline Sweet. Says Shamsuddin Jabbar's LinkedIn profile was deleted, but here are the ghost remnants. His current job was IT team chief at the U.S. Army Reserve. Previous job was information technology team leader at U.S. Army Reserve, information management officer at U.S. Army, senior information systems specialist at U.S. Army, human resources supervisor at U.S. Army, HR specialist at U.S. Army, data entry operator at U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, data entry clerk at U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, data entry clerk at United States Postal Service. His education is Central Senior High School. He has a Bachelor of Business Administration from Georgia State University, and he's a graduate from Fort Gordon NCO Academy. He's a graduate from 25B Information Technology MOS Training, and a graduate from U.S. Army Alaska NCO Academy. Associates from Central Texas College, associate's degree from Central Texas College, an honor graduate from 42A Human Resource Specialist Advanced Individual Training, graduate from U.S. Army Basic Combat Training, and University of Houston. Jabbar has several LLCs registered in Texas and Georgia, mostly seem to be real estate related. He had a Twitter account, which is now deleted, where he was active until at least 2021. Previous arrest in 2002 for driving with a suspended license in Texas. Here are some of his posts from his deleted profile. But like I said, or like Jacqueline is reporting, that the last time it seems that he was active on the platform was 2021. So I don't necessarily think that this like translates to his new point of radicalization. It gives a little bit of info on his background, but not necessarily anything significant about his new point of radicalization. It's giving PTSD. Look, man, we need to see more on his background before speculating. It can be a number of different things. It can be a point of radicalization post like PTSD post, multiple divorces. It can be, I don't know. I mean, the ISIS is fairly closely aligned and affiliated with the American State Department. So that in and of itself is giving cause to speculation as well. It was non-combat. It doesn't matter. You can still get PTSD from even basic training, but that's not exactly, like I'm saying, it's one of many different factors at play here. Let's get back to this person's YouTube video.
Good evening. I'm Shamsuddin Jabbar, property manager with Blue Metal Properties and team lead at the Midas Group at Core Realty. I just want to say hello and let you know a little bit about me. So I'm born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, and now live in Houston. And I've been here all my life, with the exception of traveling for the military, where I spent 10 years as a human resources specialist and IT specialist, where I learned the meaning of great service and what it means to be responsive and take everything seriously, dotting I's and crossing T's to make sure that things go off without a hitch. So I've taken those skills and applied them to my career as a real estate agent, where I feel like what really sets me apart from other agents is my ability to be able to, one, be a fierce negotiator. So not only do I brilliantly market your property to make sure it gets sold as quickly as possible or gets...
It's remarkable how seemingly normal this guy comes across, by the way, in this video.
Least as quickly as possible, but I'm also going to take every ounce of energy and putting it into negotiating for you and for your property to get the best deal that you can possibly get for it. So once we get to the closing table, all the I's are going to be dotted, all the T's are going to be crossed, everything's going to go off without a hitch, and that is my word that I'm giving to you as your real estate agent. So
people are saying there's red flags. How? Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about in terms of the red flags, because that just reads as like a fairly normal person. I don't pick up on any red flags here at all. I think what makes this unique is apparently his recent radicalization. He's just like a Texan man, Army veteran, and now real estate guy. Army veteran turned real estate guy. There are a million people like him. Like, I think in comparison to the Christmas market act of terror in Germany, in Magdeburg, that dude's social media footprint was insane. That dude's social media footprint was the ramblings of a psychotic madman who was ultra racist, ultra Islamophobic, AFD aligned. He was making the rounds on many other far right websites online. That one profiles like a mass shooter waiting to happen, or a terrorist waiting to erupt at any given moment. This person, so far, his profile online, what we can recover of his profile online, does not showcase a footprint that is consistent with what you normally see from people like this. Yeah, the FBI knew from me, Pamela Brown and CNN. Investigators have reviewed videos showing 3 men and a woman who may have been involved in placing suspected improvised explosive devices in the French Quarter of New Orleans. Law enforcement sources tell CNN. Investigators have also found writings that the FBI believes support investigators' view that this was inspired by ISIS with the suspect.